Good afternoon, Tanajan.
Good afternoon.
Just continuing on the theme of life hacks. I'm wondering if there's any life hacks for preparing for a good death or the dying process. These few days have been quite sobering for me. So I've had to work through like a lot of fears and worries and memories. And I think at the core of the knot is like the fear of the dying process, as well as, of course, losing the things I love, things that I'm familiar with, and all of that. And I remember one of Tanajan's talks where you mentioned you accompanied a lay person who was in a dying process. And when she passed on, if I'm not mistaken, you had the insight that there was no palpable difference. It felt very natural. And I think that's also how I felt accompanying close friends on the path. And but it's always a surprise when someone is dying. It always comes as a surprise, and I wonder how we can prepare to support people we love along that process, as well as support ourselves along that process. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, very good question. Yeah, you remembered that quite accurately. I think it was a woman called Amina. She was a Thai woman, but from a Muslim family, and she, with a great deal of difficulty, got permission from her family to take the 8 precepts as an anagarika, as a mechi, with Lumpur Sumeto, because she'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So they let her join the monastery. But when she recovered, they made her leave again. So it was a lot of tension around her illness in many ways. But she was a very clear-minded, good-hearted person. And when the cancer came back a second time, then she just told her family, "I'm going." So they didn't have a vote at that point. So she came back on Lumpur's invitation to Amaravati, and that was where she passed away. So she had cancer and was fading quite slowly, and would have a little times of recovery, and then would relapse again. And so she was in a room in the nuns' vihara buildings, and during the last few weeks, people would be sitting with her in the room, all day and all night, as a kind of vigil, because we never knew when she might go. Her breath might be obstructed, and she was very frail. So it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks. There was people in her room all the time, and we sort of took it in shifts. So kind of as a rota, day and night. There was always people with her, and then other friends would come and visit her from time to time. So on this particular occasion, when she passed away, it was about 1:30 in the morning. So kind of sleepy, but we're also sitting there, myself, one other monk, Ajahn Chandapalo, and then two nuns were with her, Sister Jittapala from Switzerland, and another sister. And so Jittapala was holding her, and her breath, her Pali name was Dasaniya. So Dasaniya's breath was getting lighter and lighter and lighter. But I think it was partially because we'd been holding this vigil for a long time, and we were all a little bit sleepy, and it was 1:30 in the morning, and the atmosphere was very, very peaceful, very still, and the sound of silence, the nada sound, was very, very loud, and you could hear her breath getting softer and softer and softer. And I was sitting there with my eyes closed, myself and Chandapalo, just meditating. And then suddenly Sister Jittapala said, "She's gone." And part of me was, I'd never been with anyone when they died before. And so part of me was expecting the kind of the curtains to sort of to rustle, or so a kind of breeze through the room, or some kind of something. Some kind of effect that would say this person has died. But there was absolutely like no change in the stillness. And so partially because there was that unconscious expectation of some kind of sign that she'd passed was going to be there, and there was nothing, then it hit me very strongly that there's the mind aware of the body breathing, the mind aware of the body not breathing. What's the difference? And it might sound illogical, but at that moment it was absolutely clear that the mind that's aware of the sensations of a body breathing is exactly the same as the mind aware of a body not breathing. And whether it's her mind or my mind or anybody else's mind, it didn't make any difference either. And that kind of that sort of hour of the morning, and it's kind of exhausted and kind of alert at the same time, it was really clear that was the fact, and that so it affected me very profoundly. And so that then looking at say mindfulness of breathing, an in-breath begins, it comes to an end, and then it stops, and then you breathe out, an out-breath begins, and it goes, and then it stops. So the mind knowing an in-breath, the mind knowing an out-breath, the mind knowing the spaces between. It's just a body is born, a body dies, and the breath comes in, the breath goes out. It's what's the difference, really? It's all the same pattern. So it was really very, very clear that the awareness is the refuge. I mean, obviously I'd heard that before, but really a kind of a very tangible, real, living example of that. And it was not, it wasn't kind of what I expected, but it was very, very clear. And so that had a strong impact on me. So in terms of preparing for death for oneself and also giving advice to others, then the more that we cultivate that quality of awareness and embody that awareness, like being that wakeful, aware quality, then the more that the awareness of the in-breath or the out-breath of a body alive or a body not alive, it's going to be the same thing. So that Vipassana meditation prepares a human being as fully as possible for that letting go. And that just how in the practice we can see, there's a sound, hearing a sound, and then noticing the sound has come to an end. The awareness of a sound or silence is the same awareness, or the feeling of the comfort in the body or discomfort in the body. If you don't focus on the content but look at the process, then if the mind stays with the quality of knowing, then the changing patterns of the object is sort of incidental. And so this life, this body, is an object of that awareness. And so whether it happens to be breathing in, breathing out, whether it's young, whether it's old, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable, whether it's alive or whether it's dead, I would say then that's incidental. A number of people I've been with where they're dying, what seems to happen is that the consciousness gets less and less tied to the body. The ordinary sort of functioning everyday consciousness that kind of loosens the kind of like a ship being in the port, the kind of the ropes are being cast off, and the ship is sort of drifting away from the dock, if you like. So it's not a perfect image, but so that even though the body is still there and the body is still breathing, the mind can really be sort of away and sort of coming back and departing. And so the dying process, if it's an illness or in old age, then it is often seems to be quite a bit of in and out, like being with the body and being able to engage and being alert, and then just having dropped the body and being apart. And there seems to be quite a common factor of that, and that also that means that the person who's dying, their experience of pain, the body might be in pain, but actually their mind is quite fine. So another person I was with in San Francisco when they were dying in hospice there, his breathing sounded terrible. It was really kind of awful kind of noise. And so I think, oh dear, his name was Kandanya. So, oh dear, Kandanya's really struggling. It sounds awful. But if I just didn't pay attention to the kind of racket of the breath, and just paid attention to the atmosphere in the room and the expression on his face, so that, oh, he seems to be quite fine. It's just the breathing process is really obstructed and noisy and uncomfortable. And so, and that was another good example of, oh dear, what can we do to help? And then thinking, well, wait a minute, it seems like his peacefulness is not being obstructed by the struggling of the lungs to get air in, which was, and struggling for breath, gasping for breath is a very instinctual, sort of strong instinctual force within us. So that was a kind of an amazing experience too, that his body is struggling for breath, but he's fine. And that was, obviously the medical people were doing everything that was needed for him, but it was, again, that kind of in and out process can be quite common. There's as a small aside, there's something called terminal lucidity, which has been noticed for thousands of years. People have seen this all around the world. So if someone's in a coma or have had Alzheimer's or dementia, unable to communicate sometimes for weeks or months or years prior to their death, terminal lucidity is where it's noticed that just before they die, a few hours before they die, they can suddenly wake up and start talking quite rationally and be completely lucid and able to communicate with the people around them. And then they pass away. And again, I think that's to do with the kind of consciousness not being affected by the body chemistry that isn't working well. And that happened with my own grandmother, that she'd been in a coma pretty much consistently for about 4 years before she passed away. And she was living in a good nursing home, but she had an infection, and also there was a growth in her cheek that was obstructing her breathing. And the doctors got the whole family in, and they said, well, we could try and operate on Mrs. Goldsmith, but the surgery would be very invasive, and she's very frail. She's got serious lung infection already. We could either try and operate, or we could just let her go peacefully, and she'd probably pass away in 48 hours. So I wasn't at that meeting, but my mother was, and the whole family agreed, oh, we should just let her pass away peacefully without trying to carry out an invasive surgery. So after they had that meeting, my mother went to sit with her mother, my granny, and they hadn't, there'd been no conscious exchange between them for 4 years up to that point. My mother was sitting by the bed. My grandmother turned towards her, opened her eyes, looked her in the face and said, thank you. And she died the next day. Because she knew my mother had been coming every week, driving like 100 miles to come and see her, and was being a good daughter, but couldn't communicate. But she kind of scrabbled to the surface and said, okay, now I can go. So the signs that we would normally read of someone being unconscious or being in a coma or being out of it, they're not very reliable, because a person can seem to be completely unconscious or comatose, but they can have quite an active inner life going on at the same time. Then maybe the last thing to say is the advice the Buddha gave. Mahanama was a relative of the Buddha and was ruling the Sakyan kingdom, and the Buddha was visiting Kapilavatthu one time, and Mahanama says, well, I'm in the position of leadership, and I keep getting called to people's bedsides, as they're dying, and I'm supposed to give them advice, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. You're the great master. Please tell me. And the Buddha gives Mahanama this really interesting teaching. So this is in the connected discourses, the Samyutta Nikaya, on the Sotapatti Vagga, I think, on the section on stream entry, I think, section 55, sutta number 54. anyway, so he says, well, if you're sitting next to somebody, you should ask them, are you worried about your property and your possessions? And if they say, yes, I am worried about my property and my possessions when I die, so then you should say to them, well, whether you worry about your property and your possessions, you don't worry about your property, you're going to die anyway. So it's a very blunt series of advice. So don't expect it to be cuddly. It's like you're going to die anyway, so better that you let go of all of that. So, and then ask them, are you worried about your family, your children, your grandchildren, your partner, the spouse? Said, well, and if they say yes, they are, you say, well, whether you worry about your children and your spouse or you don't, you're going to die anyway. So better that you let go and stop worrying about them. So it's helping to let go of all the things that we think are ours, so bit by bit by bit. So it's fairly blunt. It's not very cuddly kind of advice, but it's helpful, blunt and helpful. So then he changes gear and he says, and you should then ask them, are they resolved on being reborn in another realm? And if they say yes, they want to be reborn in the realm of the four great kings, amongst the Chatu Maharajika Devas, then you should say, well, why settle for being reborn in the heaven of the four great kings? You should aim for the Tavatimsa heaven. And if and then why settle for the Tavatimsa heaven? You could aim for the Yamaloka, the Tusita heaven, the Nimanarati, the Paranimita Vasudevas, and then all the way up to the Brahma world. Why settle for being reborn in the Paranimita Vasavati heaven? You could be born in the Brahma world. And then if they say, yes, I want to be reborn in the Brahma world, then, and this is where it gets really interesting, it is rather than settling the intention on being reborn in the Brahma world, why not set the intention to not be reborn at all, to fix the mind on Sakaya Nirodha. So I believe that's the only time that word is used in the Pali Canon. Sakaya, like Sakaya Ditti, the real person, Nirodha, the cessation of the real person. And then he says, such a lay person who fixes their mind on Sakaya Nirodha, there is no difference in their state of liberation than that of a monk who's been an arahant for 100 years. So it's one of the few places in the Pali Canon where the Buddha talks about a layperson being totally enlightened. So that that death process is a powerful opportunity, as well as all of the sort of difficult things that go with it. So there's a few pieces of advice there. So
นมัสการค่ะท่านอาจารย์ทั้งสอง this morning you ท่านอาจารย์ Amaro give an guidance meditation about the world, the perceive and conceive.
Can you bring the microphone?
The proceed and conceit.
Mm-hmm.
I would like for more explanation on this one, and I don't quite understand on the word conceit.
Okay, so this will be English. So it's a short sutta, but it's extremely significant to me. It's in the Connected Discourses, it's chapter 35, Sutta 116, Samyutta 35, 116, and so there isn't much of a story around it. It's just the Buddha saying, the world, and the word loka, L-O-K-A, is the Pali word for world. And in this short teaching, the Buddha says that whereby one is a perceiver of the world, and the Pali for that is loka sanyi, like sanya, perceiving, and a conceiver of the world, loka mani, that is called the world in this Dhamma and discipline. So the word conceiving is like manyati is to conceive. So it's usually based around the feeling of I. And so the I am is a conception. So manyati, and mana is conceit, manyati is conceiving. And so that's usually around the creation of the feeling of I and me and mine. So asmi mana, the conceit of I am. Asmi means I am. Mana is conceit, the conceit of I am. So that's a subtle feeling of identity, right? So, but the conceiving, it's usually just associated with the feeling of I. But in this instance, the Buddha is also including the world, and then he says, and so what is the means whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world? It is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So what he's saying is the world, loka, is the activity of the six senses. That is the world. That's the only world we can meaningfully talk about. And so that in Western philosophy, this is called phenomenology, or phenomenological approach. So there's a little book I did a couple of years ago called Mind is What Matters, currently being translated into Thai language. Maybe you're helping with the translation. So, and it goes into this. So it's I feel a very significant teaching, because it's the Buddha's deliberately sort of bringing it home. So the mind is conceiving the world. So it's that making the world real. So a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, like that, the mind is making the world substantial. And in another teaching where the Buddha is talking to a young Brahmin student called Mogaraja, he says, yeah, if you can see that the world is empty, the king of death will not be able to find you. The best way to evade, to not be trapped or affected by the king of death, by pramachura, is to see that the world is empty. So conceiving the world, loka mani, is the world is not empty, the world is real, it's out there. And so that so that's changing that view, so that if we see that the world is our version of the world, so none of us experience the world, we experience our mind's representation of the world. We tend to think what we're experiencing is real, and that our perception is accurate. If we've got good eyes and ears and a good brain, but yeah, I know how the world is. But and the more competent you are, the more deluded you are. The way it works. The more you're in command of your life and the world, the stronger the delusion. And it's the downside of being intelligent and competent. So the mind is, the Buddha is encouraging us to see that the world is as we know it, is built up of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Our language, our memory, all the conditioning of this mind. And that's the only world we can meaningfully talk about. And so that the effect of that is then to see that the world arises and passes away in the mind. It's not saying that the world is the Buddha never says the world is a dream or it's a complete fantasy. There is the basis for these perceptions in the four elements, and that they're doing their thing. But as I was also saying, you can't talk about the four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, or the chemical elements. You can only talk about them meaningfully from a human perspective, because that's where we're experiencing them from, even with a microscope, or a telescope. It's the human perspective is at the center. And so the Buddha says, don't try and understand or imagine what's really there. We don't need to do that. What we need to appreciate is that we are experiencing a picture, a mental picture, woven together from seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. That's what we experience. And that when that's appreciated, then we make much more space for each other. because we realize everybody else's world is not quite the same as mine. So no wonder we disagree, or we see things differently. How could it possibly be that we all see the same thing? When you assume what you see as reality and other people see it different, then you think they're an idiot, or they're deluded, they're foolish because they don't see it the same way as me. That's the worldly way of thinking. So I hope that clarifies that it's a subtle issue, but you can find more about it in The Mind is What Matters.
I don't have a Thai question, unfortunately.
You can answer it in Thai.
It would be great, but not for me. My question is with all the tools that we learn about in the book of the Dhamma, there's a lot out there. And so could you please give some guidance on how we can develop our own wisdom in order to know to guide our own development, our own practice, what is appropriate when? Because in my case, I tend in my practice to fall back on the things I already have been doing. And I wonder sometimes maybe that's not actually what would be most helpful in that at the time, but I'm not very clear about what should be more appropriate. So not a blueprint, because that's probably against the idea, but some guidelines on how to navigate.
I think the simple answer is Sappurisa Sangseva, drawing close to good people. Because other people will have different perspectives than you. They will, you'll see things in other like-minded people that you respect, that you can get along with, and that have similar goals and values to you. But then they'll see things in different ways, or that they'll find a practice that is valuable for them that you've never even heard of, or that they will talk about things in a way that sounds very strange to you. So, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. So drawing close to good-hearted, like-minded people, and then paying attention to them, not just judging them as how right they are in accordance with your view, not that you would do that, but rather just really, in a sense, developing that quality of communality, listening to others, living with others. I've lived in community for 45 years, and so that's a very live actuality in my world. I never tried to practice on my own, really, apart from a few short weeks here and there. I've lived in community for my entire monastic life, and so learning from others and the different way that other people see things, the different things people are interested in, it's marvelous. And if I just had to refer to my own interests all the time, it would be much more barren. So developing that sort of communal spirit, drawing close to other people, come on more of these retreats, get to know some of these good folks. So Sappurisa Sangseva, drawing close to good people.
And would you extend it to one's personal meditation practice as well?
How do you mean?
So when I have my time every day that I want to use for formal practice, and if I keep, for example, focusing my practice on mindfulness of breathing, but there are so many other aspects of practice I could also develop in my formal meditation. So how to see best what is most useful at a particular time?
Well, there's either, I don't know where you live physically, but also if there's local meditation groups to join in with, or there's 101 online meditation groups and people involved in different kinds of areas of practice. So if you hook up with some like-minded people and join in with whatever practice they are doing, just to vary it, sign up for some retreats that you never would normally sign up for, or that your friends are going along to, so that, oh, I've never done that before. Okay, I'll try that. So that conscious engaging with others is a very natural way of broadening our perspective, and also if you're part of a group, and again this is very much the case in the monastery, when you don't particularly feel like meditating, it's the time to go to the temple and sit. So you go anyway, and it can be very valuable. You can learn useful things when you kind of didn't want to bother.
um, I think that from my own experiences that the practice will somehow lead us. So what we can do is just prepare ourselves. When you talk about the technique that we can learn from meditation, I think that give it a try, as many as you can, and while doing that, we keep observing what's happening in our own mind. Usually, our life, every one of us have different thing that we have to deal with. It usually come up. So one thing that can be valued that when you talk about practicing mindfulness to experiencing calmness in the mind, peacefulness in the mind, one of the reasons for that is that it provide opportunity for us to look or investigate something or allow something that never come up in full investigation before. So usually it come up, you realize it. This is something that you need. You need to work with, so that, and also somehow if you are very sincere about your practice, for me, that somehow the teacher will come, the lesson will come. Let it be natural for me. So this is from I share from my own experiences.
กราบนมัสการค่ะพระอาจารย์ทั้งสองกราบนมัสการค่ะพระอาจารย์จิ๋วอันนี้เป็นภาษาไทยนะคะก็มีอยู่ครั้งหนึ่งที่ถามที่เราถามพระอาจารย์สุเมโธว่าเวลาที่ตายไปแล้วมีอะไรเหลืออยู่ซึ่งก็เป็นของหญิงหน่อยค่ะเนี่ยแล้วพระอาจารย์ก็บอกว่า consciousness is left after death ทีนี้เมื่อวานนี้เราได้มีคนถามพระอาจารย์อมโรเรื่อง consciousness เช่นเดียวกันทีนี้เวลาเราพูดถึงวิญญาณเราก็จะใช้คำว่า sense consciousness ทีนี้อยากทราบว่าอันนี้มันเป็นตัวเดียวกันหรือว่า sense consciousness เนี่ยมันเป็น subset ของ consciousness ที่เป็น the whole และก็อยากได้เป็นภาษาไทย เพราะว่าฟังไม่ค่อยรู้เรื่อง
ที่จริงถ้าแบบเรื่องว่ามันจะเป็นยังไงหลังตายเนี่ยคือก็ต้องตอบตรงๆว่าไม่รู้หรอกเพราะว่ายังไม่เคย คือก็ตอบอย่างนั้นจริงๆก็ตามประสบการณ์ตรงก็คงไม่ได้นะแต่ก็ตามจากที่ก็ต้องเป็นการศึกษาแล้วก็ฟังจากครูบาอาจารย์เหมือนกับที่ผมทึกฟังอันนี้เหมือนกันว่าครูบาอาจารย์อธิบายอย่างเนี้ยก็ถ้าในตามที่อาตมาเข้าใจก็คือในเราก็ใช้คำว่าจิตนะก็ไม่ได้แยกถึงกับเป็นวิญญาณด้วยซ้ำไปเพราะว่าจิตยังอยู่จิตที่ยังประกอบด้วยอวิชชาที่จะยังนำไปเกิดใหม่คือไม่ได้พูดถึงเรื่องตายแล้วใช่ไหมอะไรที่เหลืออยู่ที่มันจะไปอาตมานึกถึงอันนี้ไม่รู้จะโยงกันหรือเปล่ามันก็นึกถึงขึ้นมาได้ว่ามีการวิจัยที่มหาวิทยาลัยเวอร์จิเนียเกี่ยวกับเรื่อง past life experiences ที่บอกว่ามีเด็กที่อายุประมาณสัก4 ขวบ 5 ขวบจนถึง7 8 ขวบที่มีประสบการณ์จำระลึกได้ว่าเมื่อชาติที่แล้วนี่เกิดเป็นอะไรอย่างเงี้ยแล้วเขาก็เก็บข้อมูลกันเป็นงานวิจัยเลยนะซึ่งตอนนี้เข้าใจว่าเก็บได้ตั้งเกือบ 2,000 เคสเลยนะถ้าใครสนใจลองไปค้นดูก็ได้แล้วมีรายหนึ่งที่เขาพบว่าคือแล้วที่น่าสนใจสำหรับชาวพุทธเราก็คือว่าเคสส่วนใหญ่ 2,000 เคสเนี่ยมักจะเป็น sudden death คือถ้าตายปกติไม่ค่อยมีความทรงจำแต่ถ้าตายแบบว่าถ้าภาษาไทยเราคือตายโหงคือตายแบบรุนแรงแบบโดนรถชนปืนยิงมันคงน่าจะเจ็บปวดนะก็จะจำประสบการณ์นี้ได้หรือเครื่องบินตกเนี่ยนะมีเคสหนึ่งที่แบบว่าเป็นเครื่องบินตกก็ทุกคนฮือฮากันมากเพราะว่าพ่อเองก็ไม่เชื่อใช่ไหมแต่ว่าตอนหลังๆก็มีเหตุการณ์ที่พ่อเองก็ต้องยอมรับว่าลูกระลึกชาติได้จริงๆอย่างเคสที่จะเล่าที่โยงพอฟังคำถามนี้นึกถึงขึ้นมาได้ก็คือว่ามีเคสหนึ่งที่ เขาเกิดมาเนี่ยเขามีรอยแผลเป็นตรงหน้าอกและด้านหลังตรงกับตำแหน่งที่เขาบอกว่าเมื่อชาติที่แล้วเขาถูกยิงคืออาตมาก็นึกสงสัยว่าแล้วจิตเนี่ยใช่ไหมตอนที่ตายไปกายไม่ได้ไปด้วยใช่ไหมนะมีแต่จิตแล้วพอไปเกิดใหม่ทำไมมีตำแหน่งแผลเป็นตามรอยแผลเนี่ยอาตมาก็พยายามจะย้ำความเข้าใจซึ่งอันนี้ก็เป็นการเสนอทฤษฎีนะแต่ว่าไม่รู้ว่าจริงอย่างนี้หรือเปล่าอย่างทุกวันนี้เรามีเทคโนโลยีที่เป็น 3D Printing อ่ะคือสมมุติว่าเรามีเครื่องพิมพ์ใช่ไหมอย่างสมมุติจะมามีอะไหล่บางอย่างของเครื่องจักรบางอย่างที่มันเสียไปแล้วมันมีผลิตในจีนเดี๋ยวนี้เราก็ไม่ต้องไปเดินทางไปเมืองจีนไปซื้อไงอาจจะให้ที่ทางจีนส่งโปรแกรมหรือสั่งมาทางออนไลน์แล้วสั่งให้ 3D Printing ปรินเตอร์ที่เมืองไทยปริ้นออกมาก็จะได้ไอตัววัตถุที่เสมือนกับต้นแบบทุกประการแต่วัตถุเนี่ยมาเอาใหม่ที่ตัวอันนี้ใช่ไหมตัวปรินเตอร์ใช่ไหมแต่โปรแกรมเนี่ยมันมาถ้าเป็นอย่างนี้แหละถ้าสมมุติว่าอาตมาสันนิษฐานว่าจิตที่เหมือนกับไปเกิดใหม่เนี่ยเป็นจิตที่มีโปรแกรมอย่างเช่นจำได้ว่ามีรอยเจ็บรอยแผลเจ็บอยู่ตรงที่หน้าอกและด้านหลังเนี่ยแล้วพอไปเกิดใหม่ถึงแม้ว่าจะไปได้วัตถุใหม่คือจากแม่แต่ว่าไอ้โปรแกรมเนี่ยมันยังเป็นโปรแกรมที่ฝังข้อมูลตรงนี้ไว้ก็เลยไปออกเป็นฟอร์มออกมานี้เป็นรูปนะคือตัวตัวจิตที่มินฝังไอ้ตัวเนี้ยมันก็เคยออกมาเป็นตัวอ่าคือรูปกับนามเนี่ยมันมาตามจากที่อ่าโปรแกรมที่ฝังไว้ในจิตในความเห็นอาตมานะ เพราะไม่งั้นเราจะอธิบายไอ้หลักที่ครูบาอาจารย์อธิบายเรื่องนี้ไงว่าคนที่ทำบุญอย่างเงี้ยชาตินี้อย่างเงี้ยแล้วก็เกิดมาในภพหน้าก็จะได้อานิสงส์อย่างเช่นว่าอาตมาจำไม่ได้แล้วทำบุญอะไรที่เราเกิดมาแล้วหน้าตาผ่องใสสวยงามอย่างเงี้ยญาติโยมอาจจะจำได้มากกว่านะหรือว่าทำอย่างนี้แล้วก็เอ่อเกิดอันนั้นอันนี้ในภพในชาติหน้าอย่างเงี้ยแล้วมาว่าแล้วเราจะอธิบายนี้ยังไงถ้าตัวจิตเนี่ยไม่มีไอ้ข้อมูลเพราะถ้าตายไปเนี่ยร่างกายในปัจจุบันเนี่ยก็คืนธรรมชาติใช่ไหมอ่าที่ได้มาเนี่ยทั้งหมดมันก็คืนไปทางธรรมชาติแต่พอไปเกิดใหม่เนี่ยไอ้ร่างใหม่เนี่ยมาจากไหนแล้วมันจะเป็นไปยังไงมันก็ขึ้นอยู่กับไอ้จิตของเราที่เก็บข้อมูลนั้นไว้ไหมอาตมาก็เลยมีคำตอบกว้างๆไงว่าอ่าถ้าถ้ายังไม่บรรลุธรรมในชาตินี้นะก็เป็นจิตที่พร้อมที่จะไปเกิดใหม่ในภพหน้าชาติหน้าแต่จะเกิดอย่างไรก็ขึ้นอยู่กับหลายเหตุหลายปัจจัยนะปัจจัยเงื่อนไขที่สำคัญหนึ่งคือช่วงวินาทีก่อนที่จะดับด้วยนะดังนั้นก็ส่งผลเหมือนกันว่าจะไปที่ไหนแต่หลักใหญ่ๆก็จะเป็นเรื่องของกรรมเรื่องของสิ่งที่เคยทำในภพนี้ชาตินี้ก็ส่งผลนะเพราะว่าในกระบวนการแตกดับของอ่าความตายของคนก็จะมีกระบวนการแตกดับทางกายกระบวนการแตกดับทางจิตใช่ไหมแล้วตัวกระบวนการแตกดับทางจิตเนี่ยมันจะตั้งต้นด้วยการเขาเรียกว่าเป็น life review อ่ะคือกรรมนิมิตนะแล้วก็ประสบการณ์ในการทำงานเรื่องดูแลผู้ป่วยระยะสุดท้ายก็เป็นอย่างที่ท่านอาจารย์เล่าเมื่อกี้นี่แหละว่าช่วงสุดท้ายของคนไทยเราก็เหมือนกันใช่ไหมที่ว่าก่อนจะตายเนี่ยก็จะมีความเปลี่ยนแปลงอย่างเช่นคนไข้นอนติดเตียงมาแบบเป็นเวลายาวนานแล้วก็อยู่ดีอาการดีขึ้นมาคุณหมอก็บอกว่ากลับบ้านได้เนี่ยนะแต่ลูกศิษย์ที่เป็นพยาบาลของอาตมาหรือว่าเป็นคุณหมอบอกว่ารู้เลยว่าไม่กลับมาอีกแล้วกลับครั้งนี้ก็คงจะไปเสียชีวิตที่บ้านนะหรือว่าหลายคนก็บอกว่าช่วงสุดท้ายของคุณยายหรือคุณย่าเนี่ยเหมือนกับคือเราเคยเปรียบเทียบกันว่าเหมือนเปลวเทียนนะที่สว่างโพลงขึ้นมาครั้งสุดท้ายก่อนจะดับนะถ้าไปสังเกตมันจะมีเหมือนกันนะเทียนเนี่ยนะกำลังจะดับแล้วมันจะวูบสุดท้ายมันจะโพลงขึ้นมาอีกครั้งหนึ่งแล้วก็มีอาการเหมือนที่ท่านอาจารย์อธิบายเลยคืออ่าเหมือนกับที่ไม่ตอบสนองแล้วก็ลุกขึ้นมาพูดได้เนี่ยนะหรือบางทีบางรายลุกขึ้นมาบอกได้ว่าอยากทานอะไรอย่างเงี้ยก็มีนะแต่ว่าก็ก็สุดท้ายนะอันไม่รู้ตอบคำถามไหมรู้สึกว่าก็เป็นอันที่ก็ไม่รู้ด้วยประสบการณ์ตรง
ตัว sense consciousness ในวิญญาณกับตัว consciousness ที่เหลือมันเหมือนกันมันมีเป็น subset กันไหมคะหรือเป็นคนละ context
ท่านอาจารย์อธิบายว่ามันเป็นคนละอันกันไม่ใช่ subset กันเพราะว่า awareness หรือว่า consciousness ที่ท่านอาจารย์พูดถึงอันนี้ก็คือมันเป็นวิญญาณกว้างๆไอ้ตัวเพราะตอนนั้นไม่มีตัวรับรู้นี่แล้วไอ้ที่คุณติ๊กบอกว่าเป็น sense consciousness คือตัวรับรู้ทางอายตนะใช่ไหมตาหูจมูกลิ้นกายใจซึ่งตอนนั้นไม่มีแล้วไงก็ไม่มีตรงนั้น แต่มีแต่ตัวที่มีสภาพเป็นเหมือนกับตัวจิตตัวใช้คำศัพท์ใช้ว่าความหมายที่เป็นคำไวยพจน์ของมันก็คือวิญญาณนะในลักษณะกว้างๆแบบนั้นคนละส่วนกันเลยไม่ได้เป็นสับเซตกัน
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ค่ะ Can you please tell us about the winter retreat at Amaravati? The winter retreat at Amaravati. Do one have to stay for the 3 whole months?
Well, the 3-month retreat is specifically a time for vivek, for seclusion for the monastic community. So every year we get a number of lay people who ask to come and help. So it's usually about 11 or 12 women and 11 or 12 men. So about 22 to 24 people are needed to run all of the activities at the monastery. So people apply. We have a trickle of inquiries through the year, and people saying, "Oh, I'd like to come. Can I help out?" So it's encouraged for people if they are accepted to come and help, then the whole 3 months is ideal. But if they can only come for a month or 6 weeks, that's okay. But we don't accept people for less than 1 month. Also, it's very important that people understand it's not for their own retreat. People are coming to help the monastic community to have their retreat. So sometimes people volunteer to be a winter retreat helper, and that they're just sort of taking care of their official duty, and the rest of the time they're kind of doing their practice, and which is understandable but not very helpful. So it's so at the top of the list is I am here to help the Sangha to practice, and if I get a bit of time for my own meditation, then that's a nice thing. So people who have not stayed at Amaravati before, then we require that they come and spend some time. So we never take someone for like 3 months if they've never even been into the monastery before, because the idea of Amaravati is not the same as the actuality. And so we even if someone's coming from far away, or like from Thailand or Australia or South America or somewhere, then we would say, well, you have to come in the beginning of December so you can be at least 3 weeks or 4 weeks in the monastery before, and we have a conditional acceptance, but we'll see how that 3 weeks goes. So that because experience has shown, if you say yes to someone who's never been to the place before and they're signed up for 2 or 3 months, and then they find that it's really not what they were expecting, and they don't know what they're doing, it can be a real headache for everybody. And the idea is to be supporting the Sangha, not giving headaches to the Sangha. So ideally, if people are a little bit closer, like in Europe or in the UK, then they would come, say, during the summertime, like in August or September, spend 2 or 3 weeks, and so that people could get to know them, and they'd be there as a guest during that time. But if they're coming from far away, it's like it was really expensive to come all the way from Australia, 3 weeks in August, and then go all the way back and then come back again. That's not very helpful or skillful. So that's why we would say, okay, if you have never been here before, then you need to come early December, and then there will be a sort of test period. Okay, we'll let you know whether you're accepted or not by the after that test period of 3 weeks or so is finished. There's a big variety of activities: cooking, driving, office work, maintenance work, many things, library work, archiving.
อาตมาเพิ่มของท่านอาจารย์ในแง่มุมจากพระคือวินเทอร์รีทรีตที่อังกฤษเนี่ยเกิดขึ้นมาเพราะว่าปกติในเมืองไทยเราก็มีจำพรรษาใช่ไหมเข้าพรรษาแล้วพรรษาของเราก็จะเป็นกรกฎาสิงหาซึ่งเป็นbest time of the year ของที่โน่นเป็นเวลาที่แบบว่ามีแดดอากาศดีมากอย่างเงี้ยแล้วเหมือนกับพอให้มาอยู่ในวัดปฏิบัติอย่างเดียวพระทั้งหลายที่โน่นก็จะรู้สึกว่ามันน่าเสียดายนะที่เวลาจริงๆถ้าช่วงเวลาถ้าธุดงค์เนี่ยช่วงกรกฎาสิงหาเป็นช่วงที่ดีมากนะแต่ว่าเนื่องจากมีเงื่อนไขของเข้าพรรษาของเมืองไทยเพราะฉะนั้นงานต่างๆที่ตอนที่จะมาไปอยู่เนี่ยก็ช่วงเข้าพรรษาจริงก็ยังคงจะต้องมีงานที่จะต้องทำหรือว่าติดต่ออะไรหลายๆอย่างการปฏิบัติก็เลยไม่ค่อยจะเต็มที่เท่าไหร่เพราะฉะนั้นก็เลยมีความคิดว่าในช่วงฤดูหนาวนะช่วงพฤศจิกาธันวามกราเนี่ยคือเป็นช่วงที่มันอากาศก็ไม่ดีอยู่แล้วใช่ไหมแล้วก็กว่าจะฟ้าสว่างก็เท่าไหร่7-8 โมงนะไม่ถึงห้าโมงก็มืดแล้วอะไรอย่างเงี้ยมันก็เป็นเวลาที่เอื้อต่อการที่ไม่ไปที่ไหนแล้วก็อยู่วัดปฏิบัติก็เลยมีความคิดเรื่องของwinter retreat ขึ้นมาซึ่งอย่างที่ท่านอาจารย์บอกว่าเน้นสำหรับพระหรือว่านักบวชที่อยู่ในวัดกันมากกว่าก็จะตั้งกติกากันมากเป็นพิเศษว่าในช่วง winter retreat จะทำยังไงอย่างเช่นว่ามีปีหนึ่งที่ชิดเฮิร์สเนี่ย winter retreat ก็แบบว่าไม่พูดปิดวาจากันอย่างเงี้ยนะตลอดเนี่ยก็มีนะแบบว่าเป็นโอกาสที่พระที่ในช่วงทั้งปีก็อาจจะมีงานอะไรต่างๆก็จะวางงานทั้งหลายแล้วก็หันมาปฏิบัติมากเต็มที่แล้วก็ครูบาอาจารย์ก็ไม่รับนิมนต์ออกจากนอกวัดก็เลยได้สอนในวัดเต็มที่ก็จะมีเทศนะของท่านอาจารย์อมโรเองหรือว่าของหลวงพ่อสุเมโธเองที่เป็นเหมือนเป็นชุดก็อยู่ในช่วง Winter Retreat แล้วบทบาทของถ้าโยมจะไปร่วมปฏิบัติก็เป็นอย่างที่ท่านอาจารย์บอกว่าไปช่วยสนับสนุนเพื่อที่จะเอื้อให้นักบวชไม่ว่าจะเป็นพระภิกษุหรือว่าศีลธาราหรือว่าพระขาวที่อยู่ในวัดเนี่ยได้มีโอกาสได้ปฏิบัติเต็มที่
One of the things Ajahn Jiew was just saying that it is winter there, and so sometimes people who've never been to the west or the north don't realize that even at Amaravati, which is quite far south in England, it doesn't get light till 7 in the morning. Dawn is about 7:50 in the morning. If you go to Harnham Monastery near the Scottish border, it's not light till about 8 in the morning, and it's dark at 3 in the afternoon. It changes. In the summertime, you have lots and lots of it's light from 4 in the morning till 10 at night. But in the winter, it's dark and it's cold and it's wet. So you get that as well. There's an opportunity to practice with the Utu Niyama, the laws of the weather. Yeah, it was on Katina Day. It was -2 degrees. Lop Song Ongsa. 2 degrees below freezing on Katina Day. Just for your information, that's not even midwinter. That's November. So anyone who's interested, bring warm clothing.
Just following on the question about consciousness, is it the same thing as the awareness in this context, or the knowing, or is different?
It's different, really. I mean, there's the word consciousness, also in English, and also the vijnana in Pali, is used in a big variety of ways. It covers a lot of different qualities. So there's the awareness is say, something that is more transcendent and non-personal. So there could be the awareness of the move from one life to another. But what's the actual kind of as it's what sustains a quote unquote a being from one life to the next, as I'm quoted, is tan upadana, is the Buddha's definition. Craving is the fuel. So it's that collection of attachments and habits, fears, hopes, loves, and familiarities. That's would be the sort of the bundle of what they call the rebirth consciousness or the relinking consciousness. And there can be an awareness of that, so that if the mind is very alert, then, and in some spiritual traditions they talk about mindful rebirth, and that it can consciously be born. And even in the Pali Canon, the Buddha talks about that. If you wish to be reborn in a particular place, how you can set the intention and then be reborn in a particular destination. It's called the Reappearance Through Aspiration Sutta, Sutta 123, I think, in the Majjhima. Reappearance through aspiration. But then he also makes the point, this is for the virtuous, not for the unvirtuous. So you have to have the money in your bank, otherwise you can't get a ticket. But so the awareness is what I've been talking about as the vijja dhatu. That's has a transcendent quality. So the word vijnana is almost never used for that kind of transcendent awareness. Once or twice, but not very often. So vijnana is usually some kind of specific quality of cognition that's associated with some form or another. It's a conditioned process.